At some point, I started hearing the same sentence over and over again. I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. And the thing that got me was who was saying it. Not beginners, not people who just picked up a guitar last year or downloaded a DAW for the first time. Artists who had been doing this for years. Still writing, still recording, still opening their projects like, okay, today is the day. Today something clicks. And then closing it again 20 minutes later. Not because they ran out of ideas, not because life got in the way, but because something that used to feel obvious just doesn't anymore. One artist described their momentum like this. It's still alive, but softly. Which is honestly one of the most poetic ways I've ever heard someone describe creative stagnation. Still alive, but softly. Like a candle in a room where someone keeps opening the window. Another one told me, we've been trying for years to figure out what we even are as a band. 4 years. That's not a phase anymore, that's a lifestyle. And the easy conclusion, the one most people land on is, I'm lost. But I don't think most artists who feel this way are lost. I think they are split. And there's a difference, a real one. Lost means you don't know where you are. Split means part of you is going one way and another part is quietly pulling in a different direction. And neither part is winning. So you stall. That's what I want to get into today. What's actually causing it, why it keeps repeating, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it. Before I get into this, I made a free reflection exercise that connects directly to what I'm about to share. It's built for artists who feel like something is slightly off in their creative direction, but they can't quite name it yet. Short, practical, free. Link is in the description, grab it now and come back to it after this. So I've been talking to independent artists about this. Different genres, different levels, different stories. And I kept finding the same thing. Not dramatic breakdowns, not big crises, just these small, very honest moments where someone describes exactly what's happening inside them, and they don't even realize how common it is. And what strikes me every time is how quietly it all starts. There's no single moment where things go wrong, no obvious turning point, no decision you can look back at and say, there, that's where it happened. It's more like a slow drift. You make one small compromise, you put one idea aside, you change one thing to fit what seems to be working, and none of those things feel like a big deal in the moment. But they add up. And after a while, you sit down to work, and you play something back, and there's this feeling. Not that it's bad, just that it's not quite yours. Like you made it, but it doesn't fully belong to you. And then you sit there thinking, why doesn't this feel the same anymore? Why doesn't this hit the way it used to? And the answer isn't that you've gotten worse. The answer is that you've drifted away from yourself, little by little, decision by decision, so slowly that you didn't notice it happening. And now there's a gap, more like this, between what you're making and what actually feels like you. That gap is what's making everything feel heavy. So where does this actually come from? And why does it keep happening even when artists are aware of it? Because here's the thing, most artists I talk to already sense that something is off. They're not oblivious to it. They feel the gap, they feel the weight. But they keep repeating the same patterns anyway. And that's because the cause isn't obvious. It's not laziness, it's not a lack of self-awareness, it's something more structural than that. Over time, you don't just become one artist. You collect versions of yourself. There's the version that started making music just for the feeling of it. No strategy, no audience in mind, just you and the thing you were trying to catch. And that version moved freely. It didn't overthink, it just followed what felt interesting. Then there's the version that started to see what works, what gets a reaction, what people respond to, and that version is important too. That's the version that starts to understand the world you are operating in. And then there's the version that starts thinking, maybe I should be a bit more strategic now. Which sounds completely reasonable until strategic starts meaning making decisions based on what you think will work instead of what actually feels like yours. And now you have multiple voices in the room. The instinctive you, the analytical you, the you that wants to grow, the you that just wants to make something honest, and they don't always agree. So you compromise, and you keep compromising, and every compromise makes the next one a little easier to justify. Until one day you look at what you've been making and you don't fully recognize yourself in it anymore. And here's why it keeps repeating. Because nobody ever stops and names it. Nobody ever sits down and asks, wait, which version of me is actually making these decisions right now? And is that the version I want in charge? So the pattern just continues, quietly, in the background, while you keep showing up and wondering why nothing feels as alive as it used to. And hey, if this is already making you think, do me a favor and hit the like button really quick. Not for me, I'll be fine either way, but this kind of content only reaches other artists if the algorithm decides enough people actually care about it. Which, given what we're talking about, is a little ironic. But here we are, one tap, that's all. Back to it. Let me get specific about where this actually shows up. One artist told me, I had to force myself to choose a direction because I listened to everything. And I get that completely. White taste is a gift. If you love a lot of different music, different sounds, different worlds, that richness will eventually show up in your work in really interesting ways. But I listen to everything doesn't help you finish an album or even a song. At some point, you have to decide what you make, not what you're capable of, not what you've explored, but what is specifically, stubbornly, unmistakably yours. And without that clarity, every project becomes a negotiation between all the different things you could be. And nothing ever fully lands, because it was made by committee. And the committee is all you. Another artist said, I put my own ideas aside just to keep things working in the band. And in the moment, that probably felt like the mature thing to do. The generous thing. The we are all in this together thing. Until one day you listen back and you don't recognize yourself in it anymore. And then there was someone who admitted, we didn't say what was wrong, we just let it build up over time. Which is basically the polite way a band slowly falls apart. No big argument, no dramatic moment, just a growing gap between what people were making and what they actually wanted to make, until the gap got too wide to ignore. And what all of these have in common, the white taste, the self-silencing, the unspoken tension, is that they all create distance between the artist and their own work. And once that distance is there, you start doing that thing. You know, the thing. You open a project, you listen back, you think, yeah, but is this actually it? So you tweak it, change the sound, rewrite the hook, save a new version, final version 7, real final this one, and then never release it. Not because it isn't good enough, but because good enough isn't the question you're actually asking. The real question is this actually me? And when you're split, that question doesn't have a clean answer. So the work piles up in folders nobody ever hears, which is a real tragedy, because the music is there, you made it, it exists, it just never made it out. And if that's where you are right now, the reflection exercise in the description is worth 50 minutes of your time. I won't tell you what to do, but it will help you see where things started to drift. And sometimes just being able to name it clearly is the thing that starts to shift it. Link is in the description. So what do you actually do about this? Because I'm not going to leave you with just a reframe. A reframe is useful, but it's not enough. You need something you can actually work with. Here's where I'd start. The first thing is to stop trying to figure out your identity by making more music. I know that sounds counterintuitive. Making music is the job. Of course you keep making music, but if you're split, if you've got multiple versions of yourself pulling in different directions, making more music without addressing that just creates more of the same problem. More material that doesn't fully feel like yours, more projects that get abandoned, more evidence that something isn't working. Before the next project, sit down and answer 3 specific questions. Not vaguely, not in your head while you're doing something else, actually write them down. Question 1. What is the one thing that shows up in my music, whether I plan it or not? Not the thing you're going for, and not the thing you're trying to be, but the thing that just appears. The texture, the mood, the feeling, the subject matter, whatever it is that keeps coming back even when you're not thinking about it. That thing is a clue. It's pointing to something real. Question 2. Which decisions have I been making for other people? Be honest here. The sound you adjusted because someone said it wasn't commercial enough, the idea you put aside because it felt too risky, the direction you followed because it seemed to be working for someone else, none of those are automatically wrong decisions, but you need to know which ones they are. Because if most of your recent decisions have been made for someone else, you've been building someone else's artistic identity and not yours. Question 3. What would I make if nobody was going to hear it? Not as a permanent strategy, not as an excuse to never release anything, but as a diagnostic. Because the gap between what you'd make with no audience and what you're actually making right now is roughly the size of your drift. And once you can see that gap clearly, once you can name it honestly, you have something to work with. You are not lost. You just know where you left yourself. And that is a completely different problem to solve. From there, the work becomes specific. You start making one decision at a time that moves you back toward what's actually yours. Not everything at once, not a dramatic reinvention, just this next song, this next choice, this next release, made from a slightly clearer, slightly more honest place than the last one. And those decisions compound. That's how you close the gap. Not all at once, but consistently. One real move at a time. So let me ask you one thing, and I want you to actually sit with it for a second instead of just moving on. Which version of you has been making most of your recent decisions? The version that knows what it wants? The one with instinct, with taste, with a clear pull towards something specific? Or the version that's trying to manage how things look? Because the answer to that question tells you almost everything you need to know about where you are right now. If this video landed somewhere real for you, the reflection exercise in the description is the most useful next step I can point you toward. It walks you through the exact questions I talked about in this video. Clearly, practically, no fluff. And it's free. And if this is the kind of content you want more of, this channel is built for exactly this. The independent artist who's serious about understanding themselves and their work more deeply. No trends, no shortcuts, no algorithm hacks. Just the real work of building something that lasts. In the next video, I want to look at something that makes all of this even harder. Because even if you do get clear on who you are as an artist, even if you close that gap and find your way back to something real, there's something else out there that can slowly pull you away from it again. And the frustrating part is, most artists don't even notice it happening. If you've ever looked at what another artist is doing and you thought, maybe I should be doing that instead, you'll want to watch that one. I'll see you there.